Hi there, I'm Vincent Boss and I provide dating and self-improvement advice. And in today's podcast, we're going to be discussing when does a dumper move on? I provide audio coaching to help people try and get their ex back or get a new girlfriend or boyfriend. Check out my website for more details, www.dateme.tips. Please check your spam and junk folders if you are expecting an email from me. So now let's get back into today's podcast. And today we are discussing when does a dumper move on? So if you have been dumped and want to try to get your ex back, you might be worried that your ex will move on. But when does a dumper move on? Although there is no definitive moment that somebody takes this step, I will be discussing 3 important moments to watch out for. So let's get straight into this, and point number 1 is reach out time. So when we're asking ourselves the question, when does a dumper move on? When is my ex likely to have moved on? One of the first things that I always say we need to consider is reach out time. And reach out time is something referring to when a dumper is most likely to reach out to their ex, the dumpee. And from my research, the average amount of time that a dumper will reach out to their dumpee is around 6 months. Now, this is an average amount of time. It doesn't mean that this is the moment it has to happen. Some dumpers will reach out to their dumpees after a day. Some dumpers will reach out to their dumpees after 3 years. And some dumpers will never reach out to their dumpees. We have to understand there is a wide spectrum. It doesn't matter if it's days, weeks, months, years. I've even heard anecdotally it be more than a decade. Okay, so when we look at things like this, we see a wide range. But when is the most likely opportunity? When is the most common moment? When is the average when we look at things from this perspective? And that is around 6 months. So if you have been dumped and you haven't heard from your ex within a few weeks, your ex is unlikely to have moved on. Your ex, the dumper, is unlikely to have got to the stage where they're not thinking of you at any moment. Now, actually, this brings me to a very important side point, because people say to me, when is that moment that my ex will never, ever, ever, ever think of me again? And that moment will probably never arise, because you are part of your ex's life story. So when you consider the facts that you and your now dumper lived a life where you shared so much, you had so much love for one another, you experienced all of the things that you did, are you likely to ever be in a position where your dumper forgets you? No, I don't believe you are. So when I'm saying in reference to when will it get to the point where your ex never thinks of you anymore, I'm speaking about in a general kind of day-to-day sense. I don't mean forevermore. Even if your ex the dumper doesn't ever reach out to you, you will still likely cross their mind. You're part of their life story. There will be triggers that make them think of you. So when I'm saying when will your ex the dumper never think of you, I don't mean forevermore in every single sense. You've got to understand the way I'm trying to just speak this. This is more about just in a day-to-day, week-to-week kind of basis. You are likely to flash into your dumper's mind forever, even if you don't hear from them. But going back to point number 1, reach out time. The average amount of time that a dumper reaches out to a dumpee, according to my research, is around 6 months. So if you've been dumped and it's not even been 6 months since the breakup, your ex, the dumper, is very unlikely to have moved on. They're very unlikely to be at a point where they're not thinking of you quite frequently, where they're looking at other possibilities in a serious way. This is unlikely. It's not impossible, but it's unlikely because you've not even hit the average amount of time that most dumpers take to reach out to their dumpee. So reach out time is so important. Now, if it's been more than 6 months, then you were dumped. If it's been past that point, then this is a moment we have to consider, but it doesn't mean you won't hear from your ex again. Like I said, I know of dumpers who have reached out years after the relationship ended. I've coached people in a position where they haven't heard from their ex in more than a year, and during our coaching process, the dumper reaches out. So I wouldn't even say that it's ridiculously uncommon in the months after this average point, but it is the average. So if it goes over 6 months, you are in the lesser regions, but if it's 7, 8, 9 months, it's still not really that far. So just bear in mind, nothing is definitive, but reach out time is important to consider. So now let's get into point number 2 and the second point of today's podcast about when does a dumper move on. And point number 2 is anniversaries. Now, before we get into anniversaries, I just want to touch upon what I spoke of in point number 1, where I mentioned people that I've coached. If you would like me to be your coach, if you want me to be your teammate on this journey through your breakup recovery, then go to my website, www.dateme.tips, where you'll find more details of my audio coaching service. I can help you on your path to recovery. I can help you on your path to try and find somebody even better than your ex. And I can help you on your journey to try and increase the chance of you one day getting your ex back. My website, www.dateme.tips. Check out the information about my audio coaching service and follow the instructions of how I can be your coach and your teammate. So now back to point number 2, and that is anniversaries. So anniversaries are, of course, the year mark. So once we get past a year of you being broken up with, that means that every single anniversary that you and your ex shared has now passed. Whether they are birthdays, Christmas, New Year, the anniversary of you getting together, the anniversary of you breaking up, all of these anniversaries and more have now passed once it's been more than a year since the breakup. So I believe this is important to mention, because when we ask the question, when does a dumper move on? Well, the likelihood of you getting your ex back does decrease after a year. Again, it doesn't definitively mean it's over. I've known dumpers reach out after many years, but your odds, your chances of success do reduce. I never suggest you sit still. I never suggest you stand around looking at your watch thinking, well, my ex is going to come back soon. You can't live your life like that. You need to live your life for you to the full and become a version 2.0 of yourself. So don't sit around. Don't clock watch. Don't procrastinate, because there's no guarantee your ex is coming back. There's no guaranteed way of reconnecting with somebody. Can you do it? Yes. Is it definite? No. So once it's been more than a year, the odds are no longer in your favour. Doesn't mean it's impossible, but the chances are less than 50% according to my own research. So what does this mean? Well, if every single anniversary has taken place, that means that there are no longer the power in each of those triggers. When the first anniversary of each moment takes place, birthdays, Christmas, New Year, anniversary of getting together, breakup anniversary, and I said more as well on that, those moments will trigger. Those moments will make your ex, if they know what day it is, because sometimes we go through life without even realising the date on the calendar, but if they do know the date, if they check their phone, if they see a situation where they understand what day is it of what month, then this will mean that they will think of you. And that acts as a trigger. The more triggers that take place, the more opportunities that your ex, the dumper, will think of you and start to regrow romantic emotional attraction. If this attraction hits the necessary high point, this is when they will reach out to you. So as you can see, the triggers within that first year are a lot more powerful than the triggers afterwards. When it's the second, third, fourth birthday that you would have had since your breakup, it's not going to have as much power as that first one. When it's the first, second, third anniversary of the time you got together, or the time your breakup took place, it's not going to have as much value. So that first year is very, very important. Doesn't mean you can't still get your ex back, but it does mean your chances are less than 50% once it's gone more than a year. So when we consider when does a dumper move on, we have to say once the anniversaries have gone by, once it's been more than a year, there is an increased opportunity for your ex-dumper to move forward with their life and make new connections. That is the reality of when it is more likely to happen. So now let's get into point number 3 and the final point of today's podcast about when does a dumper move on. And point number 3 is long-term compatible partner. So it's very difficult to find a long-term compatible partner. You as a dumpee probably know this better than most. Maybe you are at the stage where you've started to talk to a few other people. Maybe you've gone on a few dates and probably you're just not feeling it. And that's because it's hard to find a long-term compatible partner. It's not easy. It's not a situation where you can walk down a street and the first person you see is somebody that you can marry. Very, very unlikely. So how does this relate to your ex? Well, they're going through the same thing. It's very, very hard to find a long-term compatible partner. And that is why if your ex starts to date somebody new a few weeks or months after your breakup, it's very likely that this won't last. It's very likely this is a rebound relationship and it will explode, you could say, as quickly as it started. If you want to learn more about rebound relationships, please subscribe to my YouTube channel and check out all of the content I've got on there about rebound relationships. But if your ex-dumper moves forward with their life and it's been more than a year, we've already spoke about the anniversaries, this is when there is a greater opportunity of finding somebody who is more long-term compatible. From my research, it seems to take at least a year to find somebody, on average that is, some people will hit lucky, but on average at least a year for somebody to find somebody who could be long-term compatible. Often, though, it's much longer than a year. Often, it's 2, 3, 4 years. It doesn't mean people won't date, but it does mean they might not be in a long-term connection. So what does this mean when we consider all of this? In point number 1, I was saying the average amount of time a dumper reaches out to a dumpee is around 6 months. In point number 2, I was saying that anniversaries are so important over that first year. And in point number 3, I'm telling you, it takes on average at least a year, but often more, 2, 3, 4 years to find another long-term compatible partner. What does this mean when we consider it? Well, it is likely to be a long time before your ex-dumper truly moves on. I prefer the term moving forward, but so many people like using the phrase moving on, so I thought I would in today's podcast. So if your ex-dumper is going to move on, if they're going to get to a stage where they're not thinking of you at all, or again, as I said earlier, what I mean by that is day to day or week to week, then you're looking into the years. And the odds of them finding a replacement for you, so to speak, is going to be even longer. It's not just going to be 1 year. In most instances, it could be 2, 3, 4 years. So when this question is asked, when people are getting lots of anxiety, my ex is moving on, they're never going to think of me again. What is going to happen? They're going to meet the love of their life and it's not me. All of these things are unlikely to happen for a very long time, a year or years since the breakup. And by that point, you, if you've gone through breakup recovery, would be at a position where you don't mind what happens. It's win-win. If you get your ex back, then great. If you don't, that's fine as well, because you know in your heart you can and will find somebody even better. Happiness is around your next corner. You just don't know when that next corner is. Always remember that with or without your ex, you will have a positive future. You're not defined by your ex. Your ex isn't the reason why you will be happy. You can find somebody better than them. They were not perfect. Think about it logically and not with the rose-tinted glasses that you are wearing. You have been dumped and therefore you push them onto a pedestal. You feel like they are valuable and you aren't. But the truth is, you are a valuable individual. You deserve to be loved. You deserve success, and you can and you will find it if you live your life in the right way. And that is concentrating on you and not your ex. It doesn't matter what your ex is doing in their life. What matters is what you are doing in your life. And that is why if you need some support, if you need coaching, if you need a motivational boost, then maybe my audio coaching service could be for you. Never ever forget your value. Never ever forget that you deserve the happiness that you will find. So don't look at what your ex is doing. Instead, look at what you are doing and live every single day to the full. If you believe that this podcast has helped you, then please consider buying me a coffee. The link to do so is in the description.